Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for a Thompson Coburn webinar. My name is Matt Braunel. I'm a partner in the Thompson Coburn Intellectual Property Practice Area. I am a patent lawyer by trade, but I've developed a subspecialty over the past 10 years of trademark enforcement and particularly anti-counterfeiting. Our program today is IP 101, part of the Thompson Coburn IP 101 series, Building Brand Integrity and Countering Counterfeiters. This is one of Thompson Coburn's IP 101 series. Our 101 series deals with a variety of issues in intellectual property law, and to a certain extent we're going to assume a fundamental understanding of the concepts of intellectual property registrations as part of our seminar today. The IP 101 series deals more specifically with the exclusive rights afforded by patents, trademarks, and copyrights. Patents, of course, protects generally the functional or ornamental features of a product. Trademarks protect the parts of the product or the names or brands of a product that can be used as a source identifier, and copyrights primarily protect creative content. From my view of the world, brand is the culmination of all of these rights. You're building your IP portfolio as the company develops in an effort to reach brand. Consumers use brand to drive the purchase decision in many instances. So once your product has been established, once consumers know that it's functional, they want to return back to your company and your brand for reasons beyond the simple value of the product to the consumer. So brand is the ultimate goal in many instances of the collection of IP rights and the building of an IP portfolio. Our clients here at Thompson Coburn, and perhaps your clients if you are one of our in-house counsel on the line, when thinking about building a brand or in thinking about countering counterfeiting, will often think in terms of traditional forms of competition. That is, firms with similar business models to your own, or firms that are putting out products or services that are similar to the ones that you are actually generating. So competitors for core products is a place that we see a lot of our clients focusing, and focusing on your own products or services that really you intend to reach the ultimate consumer. So this is where our brand managers that we talk to spend a lot of their time, looking at traditional forms of competition, looking at your company's products that are intended to get to market. Counterfeiting takes a different spin on these issues. When we're thinking about counterfeiting, we're going to think about some more unfair forms of competition, not your traditional competition-based, but new forms of competition, and goods that you maybe never intended to arrive in the consumer's hands, or goods that are not related to your core product that show up on the marketplace. With that in mind, counterfeiting is not a new problem, but it is an evolving and growing problem. Globally, it's estimated to cost corporations over $600 billion a year. The U.S. government has provided estimates that U.S. companies account for about $250 billion of the $600 billion loss. And the impact of counterfeiting is growing at an alarming rate. Estimates put it at over 10,000% increase over the past 20 years. Our slide that is up now is a copy of the ABA section of Intellectual Property Law's Landslide magazine from the end of year 2011, where counterfeiting was again front page news for the recipients of this publication. The cover of the magazine shows luxury goods, watches being smashed, but no industry is really immune from this counterfeiting problem. Luxury goods and digital media have their own set of issues, but also there are other industries that are impacted in places that perhaps we hadn't all thought about in the past, including reports that indicate that 2% of airline parts are indeed counterfeit. Some of these airline parts have found their way into U.S. military aircraft, as indicated on our slide. The problems associated with this sort of form of counterfeiting are tremendous and broad-reaching. For example, some studies have shown that a genuine aircraft part has an operational life of 20,000 hours and a maintenance schedule that's based upon a 20,000-hour operational life, but the counterfeit part was found only to have a 600-hour operational life, which can create devastating problems in the airline industry. The FAA, for example, has estimated that counterfeit parts have been a contributing factor in 174 U.S. aircraft crashes and other accidents. Counterfeit parts have appeared in some of our other aspects of our lives. Some of the car manufacturers have found counterfeit brake parts where instead of the brakes containing true brake lining material, the counterfeit product has used a compressed grass, which is not nearly as effective. There's been discoveries of transmission fluids that are made out of dyed oil as opposed to an appropriate substance, and oil filters that use a rag as the filtering element compared to a proper filtering element. Other issues have arisen in terms of electrical products. This is a safety bulletin relating to the identification of counterfeit circuit breakers. Some of these products, of course, are difficult to detect and come about in unique ways. One form of detection that we'll talk about in a little more detail as we go through is an increase in your warranty claims as one methodology of recognizing that perhaps you have a counterfeit problem. Other times you don't learn about it until after a larger problem has happened. In the case of some of these circuit breakers, there have been house fires caused by bad circuit breaker products. Lawsuits have followed, primarily product liability cases. And it's been discovered throughout the course of discovery that the defendant was not indeed the manufacturer of some of the faulty products. So there's significant risks associated with the counterfeit products that are out there, and your company may become aware of them in ways that are not fully desirable. Individual corporate losses are often difficult to quantify, but not impossible. The automobile manufacturing industry has studied this problem in detail. One automobile manufacturer estimated that it lost 30% of the Southeast Asian market to counterfeiting. Another study from a vehicle manufacturer indicated that they had licensed 5 Chinese plants to make various products, but learned that there were 50 plants that were contributing to how those products came together. None of this was known to the vehicle manufacturer at the time that the products were being. Anti-counterfeiting approaches are highly fact-specific. Not all of the strategies and concepts that we discussed today are going to be appropriate for everyone participating in our seminar. Today's audience includes law enforcement members, publicly traded multinational companies, and some business enterprises that are preparing to launch their first products. The approaches from each one of these angles is going to have to be necessarily different. While counterfeiting is a broad, multifaceted topic, our presentation is only going to focus upon a few key issues. And our hope today is to expose everyone here to at least one concept for helping to build brand integrity and counterfeiting and countering counterfeiters, or to provide you with some foundation if this is not a topic that the company has on its current agenda. There's 3 basic tenets to what everyone's strategy is going to require, and those tenets are planning, policing, and enforcement. We're going to pull 1 or 2 examples out of each one of those fundamental areas for today's seminar and provide a little bit more detail. But again, everyone who is participating in this has a wide diversity in the brands that you represent, different products that are out there from core products to ancillary products, and those factors need to be considered in the specific strategies that are incorporated by your company. Part of our purpose today is to give you some tools so that you can address certain scenarios that everyone wants to avoid. And what I'm going to show in the next several slides are real-life examples of problems that brand managers have noticed, have come across in the marketplace, and have either brought to in-house counsel for purposes of resolution or have taken to outside counsel and sought information on how to address it. We have changed some of the information in the slides, but the slides themselves reflect the actual supply end information. So it's real information from the counterfeiters, but we've done some adjustments to the brand owners themselves. So one common fact pattern that we see from brand managers and others in the companies is finding electronic listings, electronic marketplace listings primarily. This particular example shows one of the best-selling products from the company being offered in billions of pieces per week from a supplier located in the Shenzhen province of China. Obviously a problem if a brand manager comes to you and asks, what can we do to stop this person? Who is this entity? How are they able to produce billions of pieces a week? And what is this doing to my distribution and sales at the end of the day? We need to talk about solutions for dealing with that fact pattern. Other fact patterns are your premium product being offered at a fraction of the price. So your product is offered at $79, and the price being offered by the counterfeiter is 99 cents. Different set of approaches that need to be thought about when you have premium products, high margin products, and the costs that they're being offered for by your counterfeit suppliers. One tell for dealing with counterfeits is the product is being offered from a place that you are not. So in this example, the original goods, genuine goods, were manufactured and shipped from the United Kingdom. but this electronic offering indicated that the goods were available from Hong Kong. So common question is, well, how is it that although we genuinely make goods in the United Kingdom, is this a legitimate source of our goods? If it's not, what can we do to stop it? Another common example are the scores of listings. These are eBay listings here that we have where a number of suppliers have cropped up, and every time that your distribution chain turns around, they find that they're being undercut on price and on quantity by sellers on eBay. The distributors oftentimes make that a problem of the company that's supplying genuine goods, and the company wants to take on responsibility of protecting its distribution chain to maintain its own margins. There's different strategies that have to be accounted for when we're dealing with large volumes of counterfeit products and goods being made available. Again, we are able to take questions on the webinar today. The Twitter account is at the bottom of slide 16, #IPFakes, or you can submit them through the login process that you followed to join the webinar. Okay, so where to start? If your company hasn't begun the dialogue on brand integrity and counterfeiting strategies, where do you want to begin? The place to begin is through the establishment of a brand protection team. This slide shows some companies that are advertising the existence of their brand protection team. Okay, from just looking at the brands that we found on the internet here that are putting out information about their brand protection team, you get a sense for the different strategies that have to be implemented by each one of these companies. Whether you're offering relatively high-end goods in the car industry, whether you have digital goods that you're dealing with where there are certain eases of how counterfeit products come into existence because of digital copying methodologies, whether you have luxury end goods, whether you have sporting goods, all of those companies are going to have slightly different approaches to how they address the issues. The Olympics is one that struck me as particularly interesting. Events that happen in a short time frame are going to have high market demand up until that time frame, and then it typically tapers off once the event has concluded. So they have to have an entirely different program for how they counter counterfeiting activity. So if you don't have a counterfeiting team in place today, or a brand protection or brand integrity team, it's really somewhat of a new concept for most companies. This is a slide that I found on the internet from Toyota indicating that they did not have a brand protection team in place as late as 2006. So that's sort of a marker to put out there if you haven't begun this conversation within the company, is that you're not terribly far behind the times. Other companies have had things in place well before this, but by and large, brand integrity and brand protection is a relatively new concept that companies should be having dialogues about. Things are evolving as they are with the counterfeiters as well. This is an advertisement from Lululemon from the end of last year, where they're not only representing a brand integrity team, but hiring a particular manager for brand protection. And the job duties of that is to protect the short and long-term revenues of the company and profitability by reducing the illegal use of the company's trademarks and intellectual property. So things are certainly turning towards a more robust brand integrity practice and the building of brand integrity teams within the company. So what goes into the brand protection team? The qualities that we've noticed from successful brand protection teams is that they're made up of relatively few people. And those people have to come from diverse backgrounds within the company. So you're likely going to have someone from legal on the team to help address intellectual property registration issues. You must have someone from operations on the team, and we're going to go through some of the details as to what different members of the team are going to contribute. Marketing, sales, and accounting in some capacity should be represented on the team as well. For small firms, a team that consists of operations and marketing would be sufficient. For other firms, you're going to have your in-house counsel involved. For other firms, the team's going to be a little bit broader. For companies that have portions of their business in different countries, we're going to want to consider having representations from everywhere where the company is, just to make sure that we have a realistic view of what the marketplace realities are depending upon the country in which we're doing business. The next two slides are the core slides for companies that are in the beginning phases of these conversations. This is what I would recommend taking back to the C-suite in terms of the information that's going to be fed into the brand integrity team. Your brand integrity team needs to think about a wide variety of issues coming up with their initial strategies. Frankly, a number of these issues are probably already being considered, particularly on the operational end. There are always supplier control issues. There are lots of other legislative and regulatory reasons that you need to have transparent operations. And really, we just need to inject the concept of brand integrity and anti-counterfeiting strategies into the conversations that are already occurring. Key is transparent operations. Companies that suffer from tremendous losses due to counterfeiting a lot of times don't have the right concepts in how their products come together. So we need to know where the product is manufactured. We need to know how many subcontractors there are. You need to discuss whether those are agents of the company or corporate-owned people, and whether there's a right for agents to issue subcontracts. We mentioned earlier the automobile manufacturer that had 5 licensed entities in China and 50 entities that were actually creating the product. So really, operations needs to have the right pieces together on how product comes together, on how packaging comes together, on how inserts into the packaging or other marketing materials come together. So we begin with transparency of operations, restrictions on subcontractors, and identification of licensed subcontractors. The physical location of those licensed subcontractors needs to be reliable. The next step, once we understand how the product and the other materials come together, is to secure the operations. Okay, again, you probably already are having discussions concerning things for different regulatory reasons. From an anti-counterfeiting strategy, you want to consider other operational issues that are maybe not part of those conversations at this time. The strategy of mature brand integrity teams is to profile the counterfeit force that they're facing. Are we dealing with opportunistic counterfeiters, or are we dealing with criminal enterprise counterfeiters, or are we dealing with something in the middle? Well, those initial level of counterfeiting, the opportunistic counterfeiters, are going to be looking at your waste streams. What happens to our goods that do not meet our own quality control standards? Are we requiring certification of destruction of those goods? If we are we ensured that that destruction is actually occurring, even if the certifications are issued? A lot of the opportunistic counterfeiters have ways to get into your waste stream and take those products that you never intended to reach your end consumer and bring them back into the stream of commerce. Of course, their costs are a lot lower. They're able to offer those goods at a profit to them at a much lower cost than the genuine articles. So waste stream security is important. The next step is to think about your equipment. If you're going through a packaging refresh, or if you're moving on to the second or third generation of a product, what's happening to the legacy equipment? Are we leaving the legacy equipment in the hands of the individuals who we're moving away from if we're switching suppliers? Are we able to get access to that equipment? What's going to happen with that? We do not want to leave our legacy equipment in the hands of a disgruntled supplier that is then going to use that equipment to turn out counterfeit units that are available to put on the market. The legacy equipment issues are ones that are best addressed at the beginning, in the planning stages, because identification of a counterfeit product that's being made in a factory that was a prior authorized factory, that's using the same equipment that was being used to generate authentic goods, is going to be a much more difficult issue to deal with down the line than sorts of counterfeiters. Burden shifting needs to be considered in your planning process. What can we do to have the suppliers, while we have leverage over them before the operations are up and running, to assume the burden of doing some of this policing or paying for some of this policing? Contractual obligations are a terrific way to start the conversation. You can build up into the requirement of bonds or even insurance policies, although those are often problematic. But the concept of burden shifting needs to be talked about at the brand integrity team level. Technical measures are important considerations. How are we going to use technology that's available to us to distinguish genuine goods from counterfeit goods? Are we going to have some sort of digital marker in the packaging that can be easily recognized if the right technology is available? Are we going to use holographic technology? Are we going to create more barriers to entry for opportunistic counterfeiters by using technical measures? And is our consumer going to pay attention to the technical measures that we've put in place to assure they're buying genuine goods? Technical measures can also be implemented. Tooling itself, where we have tooling that's only useful for running so many units of the product, different ways to try to create practical limitations, counterfeiting issues, which sometimes are much easier to enforce than legal ways. Your brand integrity team needs to think about locally enforceable contracts. So to the extent that you are a U.S. corporation that's assembling or manufacturing goods abroad, a lot of times your English language agreements that you may use with a supplier in the United States is going to have no effect in China, for example. So we do want to think about having a written agreement in place with our suppliers that we can take into a court located near the supplier and have that court enforce it. This is a particularly dicey problem when dealing with U.S. agents of foreign manufacturers, where the company has a certain level of comfort with that agent and is binding that agent up through a U.S. enforceable agreement, but the subcontractors aren't considered in the process. And at the end of the day, if the relationship between your U.S. agent and the foreign manufacturer sours, you're often left with little remedy or a very difficult to implement remedy. Your locally enforceable contracts need to consider some of the things in the bullet points there. Who owns the IP rights? Who owns the tooling? What are our rights to recover the tooling in the event of a breach? What are our rights to recover the tooling or inspect the factory in the event of a breach with an agent or the supplier itself? Multinational vendors pose their own set of unique problems, which we touched on when discussing U.S. agents versus foreign manufacturers. The considerations of the brand integrity team have to begin at a snapshot in time, but they need to be forward-looking in terms of the plan, and they also need to address old issues as well. So you have to have separate strategies for what's happening in a legacy market versus what's happening in the existing market. You have to maybe have one strategy in growth markets compared to the existing market, slightly different methodologies for your planning techniques in those two markets. Emerging markets often require their own set of circumstances, particularly when we've seen counterfeiters entering a marketplace in which the brand owner has not yet penetrated and taking efforts to register the brand's core marks in that emerging market. We have not seen that strategy ultimately be successful. That is, the governmental agency issuing the registration almost always recognizes the true brand owner's rights as superior to the counterfeiter. In some countries it's referred to as a vicious registration. But it's an additional barrier of entry to your company from getting into the emerging market at a point in time that you can realize the most profits. E-commerce is a whole different set of circumstances. We could focus an entire hour on e-commerce strategies, and I have attended seminars through various organizations where those have been a whole half-day discussion on different e-commerce issues. We will call out one e-commerce issue later on in the presentation, but there's a whole host of legal and strategic considerations that you have to consider when dealing with e-commerce vendors. The counterfeiter profile, as your brand integrity team matures, is important. We've touched on that earlier on. Legal needs to provide input in terms of trademark portfolio management and other IP asset management. Counterfeiting is not limited to trademark theories. There are lots of theories beyond that provided by the Lanham Act and trademark law that can be useful in dealing with counterfeiters, particularly copyright rights. Oftentimes, the counterfeiter is creating acts of infringement of U.S. copyright law. And then in the planning stage, the company can consider design patent protection. That is a very powerful tool for preventing knockoff goods from entering the United States and can provide you with remedies that in some instances can be favorable over those provided by the Lanham Act or copyright laws. So trademark portfolio management and other IP asset management needs to be part of the conversation that the brand integrity team is engaging in as they come up with their strategy. Consumer education is sometimes a hot topic. How much about a counterfeiting problem do we want to inform the consumers about? Still needs to be considered in the brand integrity team's discussions. What information are we going to put out there? There are significant advantages to an educated consumer. Of course, the counterfeiters can learn a lot from the information you're putting out to the consumers about counterfeit products. So you have to balance those things. So we had this slide earlier, but in light of the different approaches that are considered by the brand integrity teams, again, we can see how a company that has an automobile manufacturer may have to have one set of plans for core products. Is there really a complete car that's being counterfeited out there? You may have a different plan for replacement parts. You may have yet a third plan for goods and services that are not related to your core goods. Keychains, T-shirts, hats, things of that sort. One set of plans for the car manufacturers, completely different set of plans for the sporting good companies that may be operating in multiple lines of core products. They're going to have to address these issues in a different way. The luxury good manufacturers have their own unique set of issues as to how much the brand truly drives the consumer decision, or whether you have consumers that are knowingly purchasing counterfeit goods, and how are you going to deal with those issues. Each company that has a brand integrity team is making its own strategic calls on how to deal with the issue, and there's going to be a lot of diversity in terms of those decisions. So we talked about consumer education. Consumer education is a strategy that we discuss in detail with our clients because it is a way to truly reduce demand. We can spend a lot of time and money looking in China for the source of your counterfeiting problem. But at the end of the day, as long as there's demand from the consumer, there are likely to be counterfeiters. So a two-pronged approach is often necessary. We like to think of our educational process as an effort to truly reduce demand or attack market demand from the other side. The nice part about consumer education is that you have a lot of other entities out there bearing some of the burden of putting this information out there. UGG is one example. UGG is a brand for boots owned by the Deckers Outdoor Corporation. The Deckers Outdoor Corporation is very active in anti-counterfeiting issues. One example is an organization called the International Anti-Counterfeiting Coalition. The coalition consists of brand owners that are willing to share their experiences and their strategies in dealing with counterfeiting and building brand integrity. Thompson Coburn is a member of the International Anti-Counterfeiting Coalition, or the IACC. Deckers Outdoor CEO, Mr. Angel Martinez, speaks at a large number of the IACC conferences, and this information has come from one of Mr. Martinez's presentations that they've allowed IACC members to borrow from for presentations like this. But UGG really has an active anti-counterfeiting program that includes educating consumers and issuing press releases, like the one on the screen, that are timed around key times of demand. This one is just before the holiday shopping season. Deckers Outdoor is putting out information about counterfeit products and what its efforts are to police them to caution against consumers. Now, UGGs do have unique issues. They have a very complicated counterfeiter profile, where counterfeiters are willing to spend the investment to put false soles on the bottom of the counterfeit product, that then when they cross through customs and arrive in the United States, there are actually employees of the counterfeiter in the U.S. that remove those false soles so that they can be sold as, the soles that are unique and recognized as belonging to the UGG boot. The same thing happens with the tag that's often found on the rear of the sole of the UGG boot, where those tags will be covered with false tags, only to be removed once the goods are landed in the United States. The Deckers Outdoors approach has to address some of this, what I consider criminal enterprise-style counterfeiting, and they've selected consumer education as one item in their toolbox to deal with those issues. The next slide is an excerpt from an eBay buyer's guide. Rolex has decided to launch a buyer's guide on eBay so that consumers at the point of purchase can be informed about the tells to look for a counterfeit product. A lot of companies, in addition to offering eBay buyer guides, will also put some forms of identification on their own websites so that consumers can visit the websites as they're purchasing from online sources or electronic marketplaces and try to educate themselves regarding the aspects of genuine goods. Other companies are taking things even further down the aggressive line and putting out there the risks of identity theft when you're shopping on counterfeit sites. Some of the entities will go so far as to set up false sites. So one particular group of brand owners would establish a website, offer their high-end products on that website at extremely reduced prices, trying to convince the consumer that the products themselves were counterfeit, and then allow the consumer to go almost all the way to the end point of sale before popping up a screen that says this was a false website, your identity could have been stolen, your credit card information could have been stolen had you continued to follow the pathway that you were following. Hoping that once a consumer is burned by this process once or nearly burned, that they will think twice about purchasing counterfeit goods in the future or premium goods at a substantial discount from an electronic marketplace. One of the nice parts about consumer education is that you have other brand owners that are out there doing it, and it's giving you ideas on how to structure your particular strategy. In addition, a lot of organizations are willing to help bear some of the cost of a consumer protection plan. These are slides that have been created by the National Crime Prevention Council. That's McGruff, the crime dog down in the corner, and shared with the IACC and its members and are generally available as a public service announcement or PSA. Caution consumers about the detriments of buying counterfeit products. A lot of these slides that we'll look at very quickly will deal with health and safety issues, trickle issues in the first slide. Others will deal with some of the high-end products or goods that are commonly counterfeited. The shoe and sneaker industry has significant issues with counterfeit goods and products. Others will talk about some of the detrimental conduct to the United States employees and our employment situation here. The pirated movie industry, digital manufacturers have unique issues because of the very low barriers to entry of creating counterfeit goods. PSAs helped consumers to think about the impact on folks here in the United States. Again, health and safety are a big push for the National Crime Prevention Council. Counterfeit drugs, counterfeit prescriptions, counterfeit chemicals get pressed a lot in the PSAs. The PSAs also often inject a moral component to what the consumer's morality views are if they're knowingly purchasing counterfeit goods. And that's a decision that your brand integrity team can think about as to how hard to press the morality button and whether it's appropriate to do so. The government is also contributing to the process. The State Department has relationships with their equivalents in foreign countries to try to address issues with counterfeiting. The State Department website has links to a lot of the efforts that are going on out there from a governmental perspective. ICE, Immigration and Custom Enforcement, a division of Homeland Security, participating in the process as well. ICE is really the policing force for Homeland Security and also for U.S. Customs and Border Protection, USCBP, to go out there and actually give some impact to the criminal consequences of counterfeiting. ICE, just like we saw with some of the brand owners, is timing its investigations to try to get the most effect for them, making arrests and culminating investigations very near the holiday buying season. November 26, 2012 is when this report was released. So the government seems to be participating and doing its part in providing consumer warning and educational processes. Electronic markets and electronic marketplaces require their own sets of strategies. And in terms of this one, we're going to get a little bit off of the planning stages from our brand integrity considerations and into one of our policing stages. Electronic marketplaces have extremely low barriers to entry. Anybody can be a distributor on eBay. Anybody can be a distributor on Amazon. They don't require physical locations. They don't require startup costs. All you need to have is an account, and a lot of the back office services are provided by Amazon in particular. As I mentioned earlier, this could be a topic that we could spend half a day on. We don't have that time today. I am trying to get us finished in 50 minutes and an hour with questions. But we're going to focus just on one issue, and that's Amazon in particular. Amazon creates its own set of problems for your brand integrity team to consider. Many brand owners offer their goods for sale on Amazon, and Amazon can be a tremendous profit center for the company. In doing so, however, you have probably granted Amazon certain rights to use your marketing materials. Amazon then puts those marketing materials into a database that can be accessed by entry of a UPC code or other identifying information for the company. The agreements that you may have with Amazon would therefore not limit Amazon's use of your marketing materials for goods that you are selling on Amazon, but they also allow anyone else who's selling goods with that UPC code to use your genuine marketing materials. So as an example, just one that we kind of picked at random. This particular one, there's a product detail page that was presumably put together by a brand owner itself. A typical thing that we will see counterfeiters do, troll the electronic marketplace, particularly Chinese-based wholesale websites, and they will figure out their cost to land, in this case this drill, in the United States, and they'll compare it to the cost that the drills are being sold on Amazon and eBay. They'll decide whether or not that's sufficient margin for them to engage in the sale of counterfeit goods. If they've made that decision that they're going to go that far, they'll go to the local home supply store and they'll buy a genuine product. They'll have the UPC code available. They'll enter that UPC code into the Amazon system, and they'll get the brand owner's product detail page back. So now when a consumer comes to Amazon and says, I want to buy a drill, this drill is offered as one of the options, and it's virtually indistinguishable from goods that are being offered by the brand owner directly. That consumer has the product, at least one version of the product, available from their legitimate purchase through a retailer, and they can send additional photographs of the genuine good if the seller even bothers to request that information. Very difficult to track. The Amazon system allows full back office functionality to the counterfeiter, so you can have very little business experience or sales experience, but you can leverage professional marketing materials created by the brand owner and Amazon's own services to facilitate your sale of counterfeit goods. We've seen counterfeiters who are clearing over $10,000 a month just on side businesses of selling goods such as this. It becomes particularly problematic because Amazon will offer warehousing and fulfillment facilities. One of them in the Midwest is located in Kansas, so the counterfeiter never even has to touch the goods themselves or take delivery. Amazon handles everything point of purchase on, and all the counterfeiter does is collect profit at the end of the day. So these are the sorts of scenarios that need to be thought about in your brand integrity practice. And then how do you deal with policing these issues is a separate set of questions. We will tell you about a relatively recent case, the Trey Milano case versus Amazon. Trey Milano makes a flat iron called the InStyler in this case. It recognized an issue with counterfeit sales on Amazon, and it sent practically one notice of claimed infringement, the NOCI, a day for almost a year to Amazon, asking for Amazon to delist certain sellers of these goods and services. Amazon refused to remove the listings unless Trey Milano actually bought the product and confirmed it was counterfeit. Amazon was fulfilling orders with counterfeit products. Mr. Day bought Ms. Day one of these InStyler products as a birthday gift. That product exploded, causing burns, significant burns to Ms. Day's hair and face and hand. And Trey Milano ultimately sued Amazon in California state court. Unfortunately, things did not work out well for Trey Milano, and they've bolstered Amazon's position. The California system has found that Amazon had no duty to either Ms. Day or Trey Milano to police itself. So Amazon's position about its responsibilities in these matters is somewhat hardened by some of the case law that's developed. So stepping back from the planning and policing stage a little bit to talk about where do we establish a first line of defense if we're just getting our brand integrity program together? The place that we recommend beginning is with U.S. Customs and Border Protection. This is the agency responsible for policing our borders and ensuring that goods arriving in the United States are safe for consumer purposes. In addition, they take responsibility for trying to keep out certain goods that are either found to be infringing by the ITC or that are bearing counterfeit marks. It's an easy process for brand owners to get started with. It's a highly efficient process. You get a lot of bang for your buck out of Customs and Border Protection. Border Protection offers statistics annually as to what they're doing to help intellectual property owners. You'll see from the next several slides that there's a core problem in China and Hong Kong. You may have suspected this. 80% of all of trademark infringement counterfeit seizures occurred from China and Hong Kong in 2011. The rest of the world contributing a relatively small amount. These numbers are not significantly different from what Customs was reporting in 2007. So the 5-year change has just shown a small decrease in what's happening from China and Hong Kong. And then the 2012 figures, which recently became available, Customs has changed the format to address the issue in a geographic way, which I think is interesting. 84% of all 2012 seizures from China and Hong Kong. You should note on this slide, however, that it's not only the countries while the countries that the goods are being seized from have remained relatively the same, the way in which those goods arrive in the United States has changed. The small gray bar above the United States is a cargo shipment. Those are goods that arrive via ship in a port, and they're relatively small, 1,600 seizures. Mail and express mail, small packages, have really increased over the years. I mean, here we're looking at nearly 20,000 seizures for mail and small packages. But Customs is really doing an effective job of opening those boxes, looking at the goods themselves, and seizing counterfeit goods. The values of the seizures have come down. Obviously, a shipping container is oftentimes, thousands of square feet or thousands of units of available space for shipping. Mail and express is going to be a much smaller unit. But it has changed the dynamic. There's only a limited number of ports in the United States. They have to be near water in some form or fashion. Mail and express shipments are coming in via airplane, and it makes it just as likely for a shipment to arrive in Louisville, Kentucky, as it does in Long Beach, California, in this case. So the approach of having Customs there that is operating at every international port and every international airport is a tremendous way for a brand owner to gain policing power. They've released statistics as well that show that the change in trend line, while the mail shipments have remained relatively the same over the past 5 years, express mail has really overcome cargo shipments from being relatively equal in 2007 to 4 or 5 times the amount of counterfeit goods arriving via express mail as opposed to cargo. Those numbers have not significantly changed for 2012. There are some adjustments between what's coming in express mail and U.S. mail. Relative to cargo, it's about the same. So how do you take advantage of the customs process? You begin with a U.S. Customs and Border Protection recordation. If you have a registered trademark, so step 0 is making sure that you've registered your trademarks with the United States Patent and Trademark Office. You can transfer that registration into a customs recordation for $190 per class. It's an electronic database that is used, and once those things hit the electronic database, you have 3,000 Border Protection officers, sometimes more, opening boxes and looking for your counterfeit goods. The key to making this a successful process is educating Border Protection, and there are ways to provide that education at each particular port or to participate in electronic education. The electronic education is a much more efficient way to do it. Each Border Protection agent gets a copy of a disc. It is going to a web-based program this year, and they have access to what your tells are. You're telling Border Protection, this is what a counterfeit good looks like. This is what a genuine good looks like. Once Border Protection gets into the flow of things, you can get tremendous results. The next several slides that we're going to show are examples of real seizures that are being pulled out by Customs. Customs generates a notice to the brand owner that identifies the date, the port, amount of units that are being imported, who's importing them, and where they're coming from. This is providing your brand protection team valuable information for refining their strategies. Cost on this, again, is extremely efficient. You've got all these people looking. One seizure notice is valuable. These 500 units here were found to be counterfeit by Border Protection. They were ultimately seized and destroyed by Border Protection at the end of the day. These units never made their way into the marketplace, and there's a value that the company can assign to that process then to show return on investment for the process. One seizure notice is great, but when you keep a program in place over time, you really start to get a feel for where are these counterfeit products coming from, who's buying them in the United States, and what's happening to the goods as they enter the marketplace. So this is the valuable information for your brand integrity team to consider, look at, pull into place. This slide here, which only represents 4 seizures, there's almost 3,000 units of consumer goods represented here that did not make their way into the U.S. marketplace. The brand owner has the option as to how hard to press investigation on the U.S. entities. Are we going to send cease and desist letters? Are we going to initiate litigation? You can take the information provided here and put it back into your investigative system to decide if you're going to hire foreign investigators or implement litigation overseas to help to identify the supplier and attack the supplier. This is the program that I recommend as a place to start and as having a place in your strategy 3 years from now and 5 years from now, because it's providing you valuable information as to the scope of the problem and how to address it. In addition to the information that you get as a brand owner, Border Protection is going to pump out a letter to the importers saying, hey, you're importing goods that we found to be counterfeit. This provides you, the brand owner, with proof of intent. If you decide to go forward with a criminal investigation or civil litigation, your options, the remedies that are available to you are much different if you can have proof of intent. It's often difficult to acquire proof of intent in a lawsuit, but every sale made after the date of this letter that Customs and Border Protection provided to the counterfeiter is arguably intentional form of counterfeiting and trademark infringement. It's giving you evidence down the line to use as well. So I wanted to deal a little bit with some enforcement activities beyond the policing available from Border Protection. And one such activity that's highly effective is to cut off merchant accounts. So we mentioned that you can spend a lot of time overseas trying to identify the location of the counterfeiter. You can spend a lot of effort in the United States policing counterfeiters. But there are ways to cut through a lot of that, and one of them is by dealing through the IACC's Payment Processor Initiative. Again, the IACC is a not-for-profit entity, International Anti-Counterfeiting Coalition, that offers services to not only its members but to other brand owners who are experiencing counterfeit problems. And this was an initiative that the IACC did to collaborate with the payment industry, the credit card companies. Credit card processing is a whole separate topic in and of itself, but the credit card entities defer the actual processing to various banks, and that relationship between the credit card company and the bank is governed by a contract that usually states that the bank will abide by the laws of the country in which sales are made, as well as the laws of the country in which the payment is being processed. So counterfeiting is generally against the law in a number of places, including China, despite what some of the statistics indicate. And the credit card companies will press upon the banks to abide by their agreement and terminate the accounts of the counterfeiters, people who have shown to be perpetual counterfeiters or issues. There is an expense associated with this program offered by the IACC. But once, again, you get it up and running and you have developed a relationship with the credit card companies, it's tremendously effective, and it's cutting off access to funds by the counterfeiters. So it's a whole different method of policing. It's extrajudicial. We don't have a court involved here. And it really is a powerful tool to shift the counterfeiter. A lot of what we focus on is creating barriers of entry to the counterfeiter. Those barriers are somewhat naturally low as well. But if we can cut off their ability to collect on their sales, that's going to be significant. Our court system is catching up to some of these concepts, and the case that's currently on appeal to the Second Circuit out of New York is the Tiffany case, and there's a companion case that goes along with it. I've laid out some of the facts there. Tiffany identified a number of counterfeiter websites. They had managed to track bank accounts through some of their own investigative techniques. The court ultimately enjoined the counterfeiters and closed down those websites. One of the banks, the Bank of China, through a secondary processor, continued to process credit card orders after the entry of the preliminary injunction. Okay, so there were 3 banks involved in processing counterfeiter transactions. 2 of the banks stopped their processes once the preliminary injunction order issued, but the Bank of China did not. The court held that, specifically with respect to the Bank of China, that assets being held in China could be frozen by the court in New York because the BOC was subject to personal jurisdiction in New York because it had a branch located there. And with respect to the Bank of China, Tiffany did not have to follow the onerous requirements of the Hague Convention in order to get additional discovery from this particular bank located in China. Not only is the payment portal a good way to go, the U.S. law is starting to catch up with some of the issues surrounding counterfeiting and giving brand owners teeth to go after the accounts located in China. That concludes the substance of our presentation. Again, it's time for most companies, particularly those manufacturing abroad, to introduce brand integrity into their conversations and to discuss plans for an anti-counterfeiting approach and strategy. We are certainly happy to assist you in any of those plans through some of the strategies that we have implemented over time. The strategies are going to be fact-specific and unique to your company, and it needs to be something that the company is dedicated to. You will see gains in the short term, but the best anti-counterfeiting approaches are those that evolve over time, keep up with the changes that the counterfeiters are making, use the new laws that are being developed and those considerations to their best advantage, and again, have a planning component, a policing component